Hello, everyone. My name is Shakayla. I'm the Director of Public Programs here at the Mob Museum. It is so wonderful to see so many people here today for this important discussion about re-entry, rehabilitation, training, and reintegration. And welcome to the Mob Museum if this is your first time. So this is the final in a series of 3 public forums that we've had here at the museum titled Breaking the Cycle of Incarceration. And I've seen some of you here before at the other program, so it's good to see you again. And tonight's program will examine the best ways to reduce recidivism among former incarcerated individuals. And so let's begin by introducing our panelists for this evening's event. And we kindly ask that you hold your applause until the very end. So sitting next to me is Roger Harhora. He is a principal researcher at American Institutes of Research. Previously, he spent 19 years as a faculty member in the Indiana University School of Public and Environmental Affairs, where he served as a fellow on community engagement. He was recognized as a translating research into practice scholar and served as a research partner to the Marion County Reentry Coalition. Dr. Harhora has over 16 years of experience in developing and evaluating mentoring programs. He recently was the co-chair of the National Cadre of Mentoring Researchers, which sought to translate research on youth mentoring into practice for programs serving system-involved youth. Next to him is Shelley Corral. She is the graduate of the University of Reno, Nevada, with a master's degree in justice management and a Bachelor of Science degree in criminal justice from Arizona State University. She has over 25 years experience in law enforcement. In 1998, Shelley began her career in law enforcement with the Maricopa County Superior Court Juvenile Probation Department. And in February 2001, Shelley moved to Las Vegas and began her career with the state of Nevada, Department of Public Safety, State Police, Division of Parole and Probation as a parole and probation officer in the Las Vegas office. And for the last 21 years, Shelley has been promoted through the ranks at parole and probation, and she is currently a captain who oversees the specialty courts unit and administrative functions of the agency for Southern Command. And John Ponder is also here. He is the founder and CEO of Hope for Prisoners. In 2017, John was appointed by Governor Brian Sandoval to the Nevada Sentencing Commission and to the Nevada Commission on Post-Secondary Education. He was appointed to the Governor's Re-Entry Task Force in the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights Nevada State Advisory Committee back in 2016. His responsibilities include oversight of all aspects of the programs and services provided by Hope for Prisoners, including a comprehensive array of program components designed to assist individuals to successfully reintegrate into society. He develops and implements strategic planning for the organization and is extremely passionate about the value of mentoring for persons coming out of correctional settings. And last but not least, joining us virtually is Tariq Masarani. We were having some connection issues, so we're going to try and bring him in a little later on in the program. But Mr. Masarani is a restorative practitioner and a professor at Eastern Mennonite University Center for Justice and Peace Building. And Tariq has developed or supported dozens of restorative justice programs in criminal and school settings. He has also facilitated hundreds of cases and trained thousands of practitioners. Tariq holds a master's in international affairs from Columbia University School for International and Public Affairs, a JD from Georgetown University, as well as a BS in environmental studies. And with that being said, please give all of our panelists a round of applause. So re-entry is one of the biggest public policy crises in our country. More than 600,000 people are released from prison each year, and according to studies, 2/3 of these individuals are rearrested within 3 years of release. The challenges they face when leaving prison are insurmountable: homelessness, employment, mental health issues. And our goal tonight really is to brainstorm solutions and to also better understand what can be done to reduce recidivism. So, Roger Hahora, we will start with you. What kind of research have you done related to reentry and recidivism, and kind of explain what the data shows so we can just lay it out first?
Yeah, sure. So most of the research that I've personally been involved in has been evaluations of programs. And when we look at individual programs, what we see is that the programs themselves can be effective when people are engaged and continue to come to the program, but we find oftentimes that the engagement with folks once they're released from prison is not always a given, right? And some people will come once and then they don't continue to stay on, and then those folks don't get the services. And so when we look overall at program success rates and when we see recidivism rates, then they tend to be quite high. So it looks like more people are not benefiting from the programs than are. Mm.
What are some of the driving factors you think behind those numbers?
Yeah, so when we look at the recidivism numbers, so that they are about arrests and also return to prison. And so what we find is that people are involved in lifestyles where they sometimes come to the attention of the authorities, and sometimes they get, so we find the two biggest factors, right? Involvement with substances or inability to control their emotions. And those are things that lead to coming to the attention of the authorities. Also, too, when we look at return to prison, for many people, that's about not following the terms of their conditional release, their community supervision. And we do have jurisdictions where more than half of the people going into prison are coming in because they violated the terms of their supervision, not because they committed new offenses. I think we find that what we don't do a good job, some of the best research that we have now is really looking at this notion of desistance, and thinking not in terms of reintegration, but for many people, they've never been really fully integrated into the community. And so how do we help people be productive adult citizens in our society? And so that's about helping them get involved in employment and having stable housing, being able to have stable relationships that provide supports and networks for them too. And those are things, and when we don't have access to comprehensive programs, then sometimes just focusing on one of those things is not enough. Mm.
Now, Shelley Corral, she oversees the specialty courts unit. What role would you say parole officers play in the reintegration process?
This is weird, sorry. I think one of the most important things that we get them right from their release. So the first thing before an individual is released from the prison is we have to do a pre-parole investigation. So we have to go to the residence. So they submit a plan to their caseworker in prison. That plan is submitted to our division. We send officers out to talk to whoever their sponsor is, whether it's a loved one, a family member, a friend, an acquaintance, sometimes even a halfway house. So we go in and we investigate that to ensure that, like Roger said, the first thing is they need to have a stable, supportive residence and a plan off the bat, right? So a lot of these individuals have never had that. So our job is to ensure that when they're coming out, the first thing that they have is they have a place to stay. They have a place to sleep. They have a roof over their head. They have what their immediate needs are. Not everybody wants to take that on, even loved ones. So when that happens and say the plan is not approved for various reasons, we then have embedded specialists in all the prisons, and we work on coming up with them a new plan. Sometimes it's a residential treatment center, sometimes it's just a halfway house, transitional living. Those are few and far between, though, because in Las Vegas, we don't have that many available. And then there's a cost associated. So there's a lot of factors, but we work as hard as we can to ensure that as soon as they walk out those doors, that they at least have somewhere to sleep, they have a roof over their head, and they have that first basic need to be successful, because that will weigh a lot on them.
Mm-hmm. John Ponder, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges currently for those leaving the correctional system?
Well, we know that what we've learned over the decade that we have been doing this, working in this space, is that when we can effectively address 4 areas, when we address the needs for employment, when we address the needs for housing, when we address the needs for that family reunification component, and transportation is imperative. So when you have those mechanisms in place as they exit the prison system, it's going to improve the probability of them being successful.
So in 2017, 39% of prison admissions in Nevada, they resulted from an individual failing on community supervision. So of these community supervision failures, 34% of these individuals were sent back to prison on technical violations. And there are several studies that show that excessive rules that present barriers to successful completion of supervision are a major contributor to mass incarceration. So Shelley, this is a question for you. What are your thoughts on that data?
Well, I think it's accurate. I think that back in 2017, our mission at Parole and Probation doesn't change, but the way we do business sometimes is altered based on world events and world happenings. So AB 236 is a part of that, but before AB 236, the parole board and the courts would come up with a list of things that an individual had to do, whether that be counseling, curfew, programs, just a list of things. It could be anything that they felt that individual needed. But what we fail to forget is these individuals, or some of them at least, they don't know what it's like to have to turn off the light themselves or turn on the light themselves. So you're missing that basic fundamental, like John mentioned, of what does that look like when you're coming out for the first time. And we take it for granted, right? So we can eat when we want, we can use the restroom when we want. We can do a lot of various different things when we want to do it, but not every individual that's incarcerated has that luxury. So when you set all these rules and expectations on them, and you kind of have deadlines because of either short parole grants or maybe even long parole grants, there's so many other factors involved, financial. Nothing's free, unfortunately, and you can get it started, but that at some point there's going to be a cost associated. And then with that cost, you need to have a job, and not everybody is going to hire someone. So I certainly think that it would be an accurate account, but not from a fault of trying. I just think from a fault of people not understanding all that's encompassing in that.
For people who don't know the bill, AB 236, can you explain how it affected your department?
Yeah, so AB 236 was passed in 2018 to go into effect in 2020, right at COVID. So AB 236 is a criminal justice reform bill, and it changed the way we do business, but really went back to old school style for at least me. So I've been there for 21 years, and we used to always have to have intermediate sanctions before you could arrest or violate someone. So AB 236 really made us put our best practices forward in a policy, and came with a more structured ability to what those best practices are, what that matrix looks like. So if you violate, let's say, substance abuse, maybe you get increased drug testing. You're not automatically just arrested and brought back to jail. So it kind of made our best practices come back out and resurface for us. It also allowed us to work and create better partnerships with Hope for Prisoners, some of our counseling agencies, Nevada Department of Corrections. It's really kind of tied us all together in a unique way so that we're all supporting each other versus all kind of doing our own thing. So ideally now, when an individual is released from Nevada Department of Corrections, there's a case plan that kind of comes with them, will come to our division, and then we have something to build on and continue to work with, versus reinventing the wheel and doing it, making that individual start over again. So it also is making us track a lot of information that our system doesn't allow us to track. Recidivism rates, violations. So we're kind of internally trying to figure all of that out. But overall, I think at the end, when it's done and the funding is there and we're able to run as smoothly as we're supposed to be with AB 236, I think we'll see a drastic change for that next research statistics of what it looks like.
Thank you. Now, John Ponder brings a unique perspective to this panel. He was formerly incarcerated, and he has more than 12 years experience in providing guidance and direction for individuals navigating the challenges that they face during the reintegration process. So, Mr. Ponder, if you can share your story of how you ended up in the system with us all.
Sure, if I'll just try to keep it in a nutshell, because it's a pretty long story. But bottom line, I grew up the product of a single-parent home in the streets of New York. Dad left home at a very early age, leaving my mom trying to raise 5 knucklehead boys and 1 knucklehead girl. And I think that growing up in that type of environment, my story is not much different than other stories in urban communities. Growing up without the dad in the home, we turned to the streets to kind of validate masculinity. And for me, the streets led me to the drugs led me to the gangs led me to the criminal activity, and that criminal activity led me to my very first set of handcuffs at the tender age of 12 years old. And life just spiraled out of control from there.
Can you share a little bit more about what happened, how long you served and whatnot?
Sure, absolutely. I received my first felony conviction at 16 years old. And then again, it was in and out of different juvenile systems, in and out of different prisons, jails, and so forth and so on. I relocated to Nevada back in 1989 in an attempt to get out of the heat, and went from the frying pan right smack dab in the middle of the fire. Right, did 2 prison terms here in the state of Nevada, and then I got stretched out in a maximum security United States Federal Penitentiary behind 50-foot walls. And that was where life was. It was a turning point for me, and I used every waking moment of my time in prison, number one, addressing the issues surrounding the circumstances that led to my arrest, and armed myself against those things never happening again. And as I was learning, I tell everybody my story. I say God impregnated me with the vision of hope for prisoners, and I came home and gave birth to it for the sole purpose of turning right back around and helping other men and women who were facing those same challenges that I once had to face, to do everything I can to remove the barriers that are preventing them from being successful, and to help to escort them up to the next level of life.
When we talked a few weeks ago, there was something that you said to me that struck me, and it was about the infrastructure of the correctional system, and basically how the habits that are formed within the correctional system affect reintegration. Can you talk to us about that?
Oh, absolutely. And that is why it is so important that we have a model that works with individuals inside the prison system up to 18 months prior to them being released. And let me tell you the reason why. The very infrastructure of a prison system, the day-to-day activities, right? The infrastructure causes habits in individuals that are the exact opposite of successful reentry. In other words, if you keep up this pattern of behavior based on how the institution is ran, you are going to form habits that are the exact opposite of successful reentry. I don't have time to unpack them all, but let me tell you one that I think that is just so detrimental. I remember one time I was sitting in a maximum security prison, and I'm sitting down and I'm eating lunch or whatever it was. And I looked up, and there was the warden, the assistant warden, the gang people over there, and I noticed one of the gang folks in the corner, and he was talking to one of his lieutenants about some situation, and did a little nod in his head, and I looked over in the corner, and I was like, oh my gosh. And this was for the first time, even being inside, that it really dawned on me, because over in the corner, this chow hall was racially segregated. You know, the Crips set with the Crips, the Bloods set with the Bloods, the 8th positive, the 18th Street, and so forth and so on. And it was like racial segregation inside an institution, and the Bureau of Prison guys are sitting back watching it. They allow that to happen because if something happens, they know who is clicked up with who. But the big question is, if you stay in that type of environment and you eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner 3 times a day with your own race of people over the course of a 10, 15-year period, how do you come home and go to Applebee's with your family and there's another race sitting right next to me? It's already created a mind picture in here that I'm in an uncomfortable situation. And that goes, there are multiple things that, multiple things that happen inside the prison system that is just like that. So again, our goal is to get in there to be able to disrupt that and create an environment where people are going to be able to learn and to grow and to spend every waking moment of their time to prepare themselves for when they walk out the back door at R&D.
Tell us a little bit more about Hope for Prisoners and how the program essentially works.
Right. How much time we got?
I know.
Because I get to talk maybe 45 minutes. So in a nutshell, what we do is we work with individuals that are being released to provide the supportive services to help them to successfully reintegrate back into their home, back into the workplace, and ultimately the goal is for them to be stand-up leaders out in the community with an overall goal of them never, ever, ever reoffending again. You know, the thing that we've learned and we built our model on is the training of people. Because, what we've learned was that the majority of people from this segment of the population, they really do want to change. Mm-hmm. They have no idea how to do it. And for so long, we've been telling people from this segment of the population to come home and get a job and be a productive member of the community. And some people from this segment of the population have never worked a legitimate job a day before in their life. So even if we're pushing them into these places of employment and they don't have the skills or the tools that the necessary know-how to perform inside that workplace, then the employer who wants to give them a second chance allows them to go in. This guy drops the ball, the employer fires them, slams the door, and never wants to hire a formerly incarcerated person ever again. Mm-hmm. So we want to make sure that we're taking a step back to not only provide them with the tools to get the job, but more importantly, we need to make sure that they have the tools to be able to maintain that job. And we want to make sure that we lay down the foundation to help them to build up a brand new life to where they'll never, ever, ever reoffend again. The other cornerstone of what it is that we do is mentoring. Well, we've trained up over 500 men and women from our community that serve as mentors. And the reason why I value mentors, because I would not be who I am today had it not been some men that came alongside me in May of 2009 and mentored me. Because if you ask anybody who has ever achieved any significant level of success in life, how'd you do it? How did you get to where you are? If they're completely honest with you, they're going to admit that they did not get there by themselves. They had people that were in their lives that was guiding, directing, coaching, push, pulling, dragging every single step of the way. The other thing that's broken inside our prison system, because I speak in prisons all across the country, and prisons do a mediocre job at training people. But then what happens is, when they paid their debt to society and they kick them out the back door, they release them back into the community with no wraparound services and no support. When we do that, I don't care how good the work that's being done on the inside. But if you release them out into the community, you will have wasted time, effort, energy, and resources releasing people back into the community by themselves. This is why Hope for Prisons has an 18-month post-release, where we want to create this continuum of care and wraparound services and case management, mentoring, vocational training, substance abuse treatment, and just to be there with them to help them to navigate the different challenges they're going to be facing during the reintegration process.
And Roger, I know that this is an area that you're quite familiar with too, and I believe a proponent of is these comprehensive programs that kind of address all the very various different issues when it comes to reintegration. Can you tell us a little bit more about your studies when it comes to comprehensive programs?
Yeah, so and I think what John's just describing is just really a great example there. So if we think about how people are successful, and it's because they have those support systems in place, right? They're connected to people, they're connected to networks. A good example is how most people get jobs because of who they know people, right? And then those connections, right? But yet we tell people coming out of prison who've maybe never had a job, put in applications, go knock on doors, go as strangers, right, and try to get jobs. And so they're already at a disadvantage there. And so I think building in those supports and how we help people, make those connections. And even, we hear about, what's happening when they're just getting out. That's a critical time. We lose so many people because they come out and they're floundering, right? And so people, I like what John said, most people, in my experience, most people at some point while they're incarcerated get to the point where they really do want to be somebody better than who they were before that got them there, right? But if no one's there to guide them, to show them what to do, then, at some point they're going to be surviving, and they know how to survive, and they're going to make choices when it's about survival that is going to lead them in trouble. So employment is important, but the better employment programs are the ones that have case management and mentoring. The programs that cognitive behavioral mentoring program or cognitive behavioral therapy programs are important, but the best ones are the ones that really integrate role playing and helping people practice those in increasingly difficult situations, right? If all they ever do is talk about what they're going to do, but they never get to put it into practice, as soon as they get back with their old the folks that they knew before, those people don't want them to be somebody different, right? And so so they really do need to have that kind of support. And if we don't engage people in relationships with the support systems in the community before they get out, there's not enough time to build those relationships before it's too late. So comprehensive, meaning that we're doing all of that. And I have to say 18 months before and after, that is very impressive. Because some people get a week before, and they get one contact, and they get referrals to programs that don't even exist anymore. So, trying to make sure that those things are in place, so that they deal. And the last thing that I'll say is, we know that people coming out of prison, there's an adjustment period, right? It's disorienting to have been incarcerated for a while and then be back in the community. And for many of them, it's akin to PTSD, right? So they're coming out of a setting where there was trauma, right? And you hear people talk about how they can't go to a place like Walmart because they can't control their environment enough, right? They can't look at a menu and make choices because they haven't had to do that for a while. They can't sit in a room where they can't put their back against the wall. They can't. I was on a panel recently with another similar situation as John, somebody who'd been incarcerated, and he'd been out for a while running a program, and he talked about going to the doctor, and they put him in a small room, and shut the door, and he said, in an instant, after 8 years of being out, in an instant, he was back having a panic attack because it reminded him of being in a cell, and he had to leave. He left, he got out and left and didn't even get served because it was that kind of a trigger. And so to think about, even after 8 years, right, that those moments come back so strong. If they don't have those relationships in place, we lose those people get lost.
Thank you. So I'd like to bring in Tariq Masarani. Tariq, if we can unmute him, he is joining us through audio. I'm hoping we can get a connection here. Tariq, if you can hear me, say hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
I hear you.
Whoa. So Tariq is an experienced restorative justice practitioner, an approach to justice that has become more popular in recent years. So Tariq, for people who don't know what RJ is, can you explain what restorative justice is and the role that it plays in the correctional system?
Sure thing. And thank you, Shakila. And I'm sorry to have come in through audio and not be there in person. But I'm excited nonetheless that this conversation is happening. It's an important one. So restorative justice, in the narrow sense, the term came to describe, starting in around the 70s, to describe kind of an alternative to the criminal justice system. Instead of prosecuting folks, incarcerating folks, the idea was, well, what if we brought people together in sort of a dialogue process to talk about what happened, who's been harmed, impacted, affected by what happened, and what needs to be done about it. And when everyone's willing to go through that process, they often come out with agreements on how to make things better again, how to repair things, how to restore again. And so that's what restorative justice was early on, and it has grown since then to encompass much more than just a kind of parallel or even diversion from the criminal system. Restorative justice now appears in schools as ways not only to deal with discipline, alternatives to exclusionary discipline like suspension and expulsion, but also as a way to build community. So you will find restorative practices appearing in homes, with families, in workplaces, in schools, as well as continuing on in the criminal system. I would say the primary way in which restorative justice addresses mass incarceration is preventing it to begin with, right? There are many diversion programs that might go from as early as pre-arrest or pre-charge, so at least pre-prosecution, pre-plea. But also on the back end, there may be programs that do post-sentencing and even post-release restorative justice processes. Those might be more for the emotional healing and closure for participants rather than as an alternative or a substitute to the criminal process.
Thank you, Tariq. Now, Tariq has taken cases involving individuals who were currently or formerly incarcerated, and there is one story in particular, Tariq, that I'd like for you to share with the audience. It is a horrific case. It's about a Marine who killed his wife. And Tariq, for the people in the audience, can you explain your involvement with this case?
Sure. This case grew out of, to sort of zoom out for a second here, restorative justice in the last 4 years, I would say, has seen the increasing involvement of prosecutors. So to name one, Attorney Ford, Aaron Ford in Nevada, has supported a restorative justice program that we're piloting in Clark County, right there in Las Vegas. I've been working with a number of the prosecutors across the country, and one of them in particular was Parissa Dalgami-Tefti, the elected attorney, what they call Commonwealth Attorney for Arlington County, Virginia. She came in at the beginning of 2020, right in the pandemic, along with the pandemic. And one of the first things she wanted, so she came in on a platform of restorative justice, like using that as one of a number of tools available to a prosecuting office. And then quite soon after taking office, she sent us this case. I think her office had decided that this was a particularly compelling case for restorative justice because there was a child involved. So the husband and wife had a 2-month-old at the time of the incident, and everyone in the office realized that this 2-month-old would be best off if there was some kind of reconciliation that could happen between the wife's family and the individual, that the husband who was currently incarcerated.
Thank you.
And I could say a little bit more about the fact. Should I say a little bit more about the facts of the case? I think you might show one of the clips, right?
Yep. Just share very briefly what happened with that case.
Yeah. So in this case, they were both Marines, and after they got married and they had a child, they met in the Marines actually, and they were going to a Marine ball, one of these annual functions that's characterized by a lot of alcohol drinking. And in this case, the individual, Rodolfo, was comfortable with his name being used and the video being shown and shared. He blacked out and woke up with his wife asphyxiated next to him. He turned himself in later on, and that began the criminal process, which actually had already been going for 2 years by the time Parissa received the case as the incoming Commonwealth attorney and diverted it to restorative justice.
Thank you. Now,
and I'll say
sorry.
let me just say we met with him over the course of a year, almost on, I say we, Leanne Roselle, a colleague of mine, on a regular basis. One of the things that restorative justice does as a process is spend a lot of time meeting one-on-one with the individuals involved before you ever bring anyone together. And that's what differentiates it from most mediation models. And that's what also helps restorative.
I think we're losing. I think we're losing you. But to just briefly paraphrase what Tariq was saying, this case about a Marine who killed his wife, blacked out, and this was in the news stories as well, and woke up next to his wife who was dead. And the wife's family actually wanted the child that was involved to have some type of relationship with the father, who is currently incarcerated. And so that's when Tariq and his team stepped in. And so this is, of course, an extreme case of Tariq's work, but I wanted to share it with you all because I do think that it speaks to another component of re-entry, and that's accountability. And so if we can play this short video of an interview that Tariq did with this person. It's about a minute long, and we can share it.
Accountability means taking charge and actually accepting the consequence of your actions. Through speaking with Leanne and Tariq, I was able to, they just helped me out a lot more in accepting what I've done, acknowledging it, and seeking forgiveness. There's a lot of inmates that I've met throughout my incarceration over here who still haven't accepted the fact that they've committed a crime and that it's their fault. They're constantly looking for anything to blame it on, whether it's the deputies, the other person. They've never accepted the fact that it was them who caused the harm.
Tariq, do we have you? Okay, I think we may have lost him. Oh, is that?
Can you hear? Can you hear? Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, so we just played the video with Rodolfo, where he talks about accountability. And the last question that I'll ask you, Tariq, what does accountability look like in restorative justice?
Yeah, this is one of the huge sort of paradigmatic differences between the criminal system and the restorative justice system. So whereas in the criminal system, you're looking to find out what law, sort of what abstract rule that was made oftentimes by people very distant from the incident, people who may not represent or even share any identity with those who have involved. And that is decided by someone, an authority from a podium, through a very antagonistic process of trying to come to a truth, but really trying to, as much as possible, not tell the truth, as much as you can get away with. Restorative justice swings very far away from that in trying to create a space where everyone is honest and can be honest, because there isn't a punishment at the end of it, but rather the accountability comes from people realizing, knowing that they have harmed someone and wanting to find repair. And that kind of process that taps into what neuroscientists would call the empathic impulse. It's something that all humans have. It's something that's part of our evolutionary biology as social animals. That process is tapped into in restorative justice, so that people come together, they share openly, and someone who takes accountability intrinsically wants to make things better again. So you heard Rodolfo, and he came to a stage where he no longer was trying to hide what he'd done. He no longer was even withdrawing into his own deep shame around what he'd done. But he came through it now empowered to know that he'd done this, and he wants to do his best to repair and move forward, which is a much different outcome than you get in most criminal processes.
Yes, thank you, Tariq. We really do appreciate that. And now, this is also an area that Roger is knowledgeable about. Can you tell us a bit about the data surrounding prison-based restorative justice initiatives?
Yeah, so so I'm involved with the project currently in Michigan. We did it in Indiana as well, bit of proof of concept, and where we give people an opportunity to have a restorative justice conference with either the victim of their crime or members of their family who that relationship may have been impacted by their incarceration or their criminal activities. And what we found was that folks who did this, and it's a similar process to what Tariq was describing, right? So there's a whole preparation that happens individually between the person who's incarcerated and whoever's coming to the conference as well. And we followed people for up to 7 years afterwards. And the differences were so dramatic, right? I mean, 50% difference in terms of recidivism, where up to the first 3 years after, nobody that had done a conference had recidivated. And in the control group, it was 50%. And then even after 6 years, was still a difference of 50% there. So we're doing a larger study now to document. But and people talk about that the relationships are transformed, and there's healing that happened, and it changes how they see themselves too. When they take accountability, and it just changes who they believe themselves to be too, which are all we know are important for reentry.
Yeah, thank you. So there are 130 police officers who serve as mentors to Hope for Prisoners clients. And I want to spend just a few minutes to talk about that because it's pretty rare. So John Ponder, can you talk to us a little bit about that culture shift, and not just for law enforcement, but also for those who were formerly incarcerated?
Oh, absolutely. And it was a culture shift, again, on both sides. And let me tell you the reason why we do that. Because I think that we're at a space in our country where the mindsets need to be shifted on both sides, right? When we originally approached by the law enforcement, I remember our sheriff coming to us and making a comment, something to the effect that they come to the realization that they cannot arrest their way out of the ills in the community, right? That they had gotten fantastic, and they're great at locking people up. And some people go away 15, 20 years, but at the time the sheriff had indicated that, here it is 20 years later, and the people are coming home from prison and they're re-arresting them again. And not only they're re-arresting them, but they're arresting the next generation of their family. And so when the sheriff has said, how could we think outside the box and not only help people not go back to prison, but what can they do as a law enforcement agency to help people live levels of life that most people only dream of? So that's when we entered into this mentoring partnership with law enforcement. And never before in the history of reentry, nowhere on this planet to this magnitude has law enforcement gotten involved in mentoring and training people coming home from the prison system. And it is really helping men and women that are coming home when you see people with their boots on the ground literally trying to help. It's changing their perspective on law enforcement. But if you flip the coin around the other side, and I can get up and run around this stage, because it's forcing law enforcement to do the things that they sat around and talked about doing for years. Getting out in the community, putting their boots on the ground, and it's helping law enforcement view people who are coming home from the prison system after they paid their debt to society. It's helping them to view them from a whole another set of lenses. And the thing that I really love about that as well is because if you think about it, right? If you go back a few years ago, there was many disruptions across in communities across the country, right? And people do not trust police. Yeah. They don't trust police. But the reason why they don't trust police is because they're not in relationship with the police. And what relationship could you ever establish trust unless there's life rubbing up against life in the spirit of complete transparency, where you realize that we have more in common than we have difference? I think that out of that level of transparency creates a relationship, and after that, when that relationship is formed, that's when you'll be able to establish trust. It wasn't easy for us to get here. I remember sitting in a room with some law enforcement officers with the then Captain Kevin McMahill, and he got about 70 police officers in the room, and he said that he thought that he had the authority to say, hey, we're going to start mentoring formerly incarcerated people. He made the mistake of saying, well, you're not being voluntold. I'm looking for some volunteers. And out of those 70, 66 of them got up and walked up out of the room, because they didn't want anything to do with it. And out of that, we started with a cadre of police officers who were committed to the process. They had at first got ridiculed by other police officers. They said that in locker room talk, locker thought they was going, hey, Officer Huggathug, how's it going? But those officers stayed, and out of that grew 135 police officers that are committed and dedicated to helping people return back to the community. And many of them were the arresting officers from 16, 17 years ago, and today they're best friends. And I think that when the community sees that, when employers begin to see the level of engagement with police officers, it makes them question, why would you not want to hire them with that level of, extra levels of accountability in them?
Shelley, your thoughts. I know that there is an officer from your team that works with Hope for Prisoners as well.
Yes, so we are very lucky to be a part of the Hope for Prisoners community and a partner with them, as obviously a lot of our individuals that come out of prison need the services that Hope for Prisoners can give them. On top of that, John and his team have been very helpful with some of our people that have never been actually in prison. They are sentenced to terms of probation instead, so the difference between the two is probation, they're not going to prison. They may do jail time, but prison, you're going for a year or longer. So his team also helps our probationers to try to stop them from entering that prison life. We had a chief a while back who was very adamant that we be more community oriented. So it kind of started back then where we actually also have officers embedded in the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police substations. So we're showing a united front that we're all working together for their success. So currently we have officers in 5 different metro stations around the valley. Then we also have some at North Las Vegas, and then we have liaisons with Henderson Police. And then we're still continuing to grow and have officers involved and be more involved with the Hope for Prisoners program, because it's so vital to what our mission and what our goal is in the community.
Thank you. Now, according to reports, another challenge for community supervision is high caseload numbers. And so probation and parole officers, they often lack the resources to prioritize supervision and services for individuals at a high risk of reoffending. So Shelley, another question for you. Can you talk about some of the difficulties that you've experienced with staffing your department? What's the vacancy rate for you?
Well, statewide, our vacancy doesn't look horrible. So, but considering it is bad, we have a 22% statewide vacancy rate, and that includes our rural offices, Winnemucca, Elko, Ely, Pahrump, Reno. We have a variety of openings. But what people don't realize is that our ratios are actually dictated by an outside vendor through the governor's office that determines what the predictions are and then what our ratios and staffing levels should be, but really only on the sworn side, not so much our support. And without our support team, it's hard for the sworn side to do their job. So it's kind of like a catch-22. But in Las Vegas alone, we are 43 sworn positions short. So unfortunately, our numbers are high. Our officers are doing the best that they can do. We have a variety of caseloads with a variety of different requirements, so you have to kind of balance that all out. So we're doing good, but we could be doing better, and we could be using a lot of our time and resources in that other component of being more involved with Hope for Prisoners, being more involved in our community events, being more involved to help individuals individually versus continuously maybe trying to put out fires depending on what your day looks like. So every day is a new day, which is kind of one of the intriguing parts of how I got in this job, because every day is something different. You don't know what you're going to expect. So it's just not the run-of-the-mill office job or law enforcement job. You just really don't know what you're going to encounter. So when, and I hold out hope that we will be fully staffed, I think you'll see even better statistics and better improvements with our agency, but not just in Las Vegas, in the state. You know, our rural offices, they have even less resources than our urban ones. So we have to consider them as part of our family and work together. What resources can we also push to them? We're trying to get John to get Hope for Prisoners up in Reno to kind of expand that program and let our northern counterparts have the same advantages that we're getting with the program down here.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Why do you think it's so difficult to retain people?
It's kind of a tricky question. To be honest with you, if you look at any other law enforcement agency, we're paid significantly less. So compared to Metro, Henderson, North Las Vegas, Washoe County, the other counties throughout the state, we are significantly lower base pay, lower benefits. So unfortunately, as much as we try to retain them and we tell them all the wonderful things that we are and they do and they support that, it's hard when you're also trying to provide for your family and other agencies can offer you a little bit more. So we have an amazing team that we are really trying to recruit, and we're trying to, not just our sworn, but also our civilian staff too, and try to get a little bit more buy-in. Our director is working with the governor's office to try to increase some of that pay and benefit disparity that we have. But unfortunately, I think this is a cycle that we're going to continue to have until we get actually invited to the table and be more equal ground of what that pay and benefit looks like. Because people do believe in it. It's just, it's a struggle when you're starting off and you're new and you have a family yourself to take care of.
Yeah. Thank you. There is a certain age group that has the highest reoffending rate, a staggering 80%, and that's 18 to 24-year-olds. And Roger, I know that this is an area that you're studying right now. 80%, why is that number so high?
Well, so we're trying to figure that out. What it looks like is that these are young people who are still developing. They don't have the same capacity as older adults to make good decisions, to think about the future, to think about consequences. They also, many of them, because they've been in the system for a while, they have their educational attainment isn't as high. They have been in and out of the system for many years, many of them, and so that's been disruptive at a time where it's disrupted their relationships. It's sort of constrained the kinds of peer relationships that they've had, so that they're mostly with negative influences, if you will, and then when they're have access to programs, they oftentimes don't qualify. They don't have the educational background or the credentials, so they're not getting into the programs. They don't take advantage of opportunities. They're not seeking out mentors that they're locked up with, that you often hear older people will do. And so and they oftentimes are focused on, I want to get out, I'm going to go have fun, I'm going to do, and and I think we don't do a good job of engaging these folks and helping them understand and provide the kind of scaffolding, if you will, that we provide to people who go to college or who are in the workforce. And so they're struggling through some of those same developmental trajectories without those supports, and it's a rocky road and easy for them to just keep going back.
John Ponder, is there anything that your organization is doing to reach out to that specific age group?
So the 18 to 24, yes, we do work with people that are 18 to 24, but our primary work is for, working with the adults. It's very true that's a very vulnerable population, and that group needs to be reached. I know of a fantastic organization, the Chef Jeff Project, that's out in North Las Vegas, and he does a fantastic job of working with youth, particularly in that area. But our work is generally with the older population.
Got it. So Hope for Prisoners helps over 400 men and women each year. However, almost 6,000 people are released from prison in Nevada. So John Ponder, another question for you. What can be done to close that gap?
Oh my gosh, can I get a bullhorn? And that's some people ask me, John, what is it that gives you heartburn? What keeps you up at night, right? And our organization, in our last fiscal year, we had the privilege of working with 493 men and women, right? But there are nearly 6,000 people that are being released from the Nevada Department of Corrections every single year, right? The Federal Bureau of Prisons last year released 696 men and women returned back to the District of Nevada from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Our Clark County Detention Center releases 200 people every single day. So Metro arrests 250. You got 250 coming in the front door and 200 going out the back door every single day. And that's what keeps me up at night. So what is it that could help bridge that gap? Obviously more resources, right? More resources to fund the great work that we're doing. And the other thing that I think is imperative is that other service providers that are operating in this space to get in the game. But again, they'll need funding for that as well. I just think that other service providers that are delivering the same level of care that that's going to help people to be successful is something that we need. But I think that those of us who are operating in this space, can certainly, it always comes down to funding. And sometimes I hear people say, oh, we don't have money for it. My question is, what is it costing you not to?
Before we open this discussion up to the audience for any questions, Shelley and Roger, I'll just ask a last question for you, something similar that I've asked to John Ponder. But some solutions, what are your thoughts on solutions on reintegration and what can be done to move forward?
Well, I think it's kind of a tricky question, right? I think nobody wants to do bad. I think that unfortunately some of us make a left turn and some of us make a right turn. So depending on what that looks like can kind of determine your path. So I think it's easy to say that someone needs substance abuse counseling, mental health counseling, but what does that really mean? And we're not investing the time to figure out what that really means for that individual. Because what it might mean for me might mean something different for you. So it's really just important that, I think the community as a whole needs to understand and be a little patient with some individuals that you may just not know their story or may not know what that looks like for them just because they made a different turn than you did. And maybe your story is exactly the same and you just didn't get caught. So I think it's just really important to remember that they are trying. Everybody is trying to make a difference and they are trying to do better. But unfortunately, they get hurdles that we just don't have all the time ourselves. So it's hard to understand to put ourselves in those shoes. But we just need to be a little bit patient and we need to be a little bit more understanding and we need to be a little bit more sympathetic to what we hear and what we see. And it's very easy to judge someone based on a news story and it's very easy to jump to conclusions, but you're only hitting a snapshot of that story and what that narrative is that they're trying to sell. So I think that if we could just be a little bit broader minded, I think that it could help. And I think if people were a little bit more forthcoming in what their needs are and communicate that a little bit more, while we have the opportunity to get them, in schools, you were talking about 18 to 24-year-olds having this cycle, but we can stop that. Most of them are still in high school at 17, 18 years old, so it's not new. It's something that we just need to pay a little bit more attention to and invest a little bit more time to help them.
Roger.
Yeah, and I think what I would add is I think there are some systemic issues that we could try to address. There's a lot of what we call collateral consequences of having been incarcerated, having a felony conviction, and those are things that get in the way of being able to get a job. Sometimes it affects where people are allowed to live. It's a further burden on the family because the family is also carrying some of that, and we can change some of those. I mean, some of what happens is these are sort of a local interpretation of what they believe federal policies are, but sometimes they're wrong about that, and we can make those changes. And we need to create real opportunities too. And one thing many people coming out of prison want to do, and we heard a little bit on the video, I think too. They get to a place where they want to make a contribution. They want to be part of the solution in the community, and many times we don't give them that chance to be civically engaged and to let them be involved, and that costs us nothing too. And then the last thing I'll say, I heard recently somebody say, if you think about how much we invest in people on the last day they're in prison compared to what we invest in them the first day that they're out of prison, there's a huge difference there. And that is, we got to do better than that. We can't be spending more money to keep people in prison than we are building them up to be able to thrive in the community.
Yep. Thank you. John, did you want to say anything else?
No.
Got it.
I was just agreeing with him.
So we do have just a few minutes to answer any questions from the audience. Our Jeff has a mic, and we have two questions. Oh, we have a question over there, and then we'll come up here.
Thank you. I'm Chef Jeff of the Chef Jeff Project in North Las Vegas.
Welcome.
Pleasure. I want a quick question right quick. How many formerly incarcerated folks do we have in the room here? Raise your hand. Okay, interesting.
Thanks for coming.
Roger, I really admire the work that you're doing and the gentleman who called in on the restorative practices. We work with young people from the age of 12 all the way up. I've been out of prison 25 years now. I spent 10 years in the federal system. And we found that addressing the trauma, the harm, and the criminalization of young people, especially black and brown youth, who come from families of generational poverty, generational incarceration. And so for me, I believe that in order to truly break the cycle of incarceration, we have to focus on life before prison. Because if we don't disrupt the school to prison pipeline, the poverty to prison pipeline, we will continue to have panels like this and have the high incarceration rate, especially young black and brown men in this country. And so my findings over the 2 years we had this nonprofit is that we institute the restorative circles, healing circles, conferencing where we bring in the parents. We had a young boy in our program since he was 13 years old, and we had a conferencing this Saturday because of some disruptive criminal behavior he was having in school and at home. His father's serving a double life in California prison system, mother's in prostitution, HIV positive, and he lives in a house with women that he doesn't respect. He was arrested for domestic violence at the age of 13, where he was kicked to get out of his bed so a trick could be turned in his bed. He jumped up, broke the TV, kicked the door, and the door hit his mother, and he was charged with domestic violence. A child who is extremely damaged. And so we have to focus on the decriminalization process of the population of people. Because if we don't kill the criminal mindset, no matter what programs we go through in prison, no matter what reentry programs we have on the outside, we will still think criminally. And so it's important that more funding, more emphasis are put on the youth. If we kill the pipeline to prison, we won't have this adult population. But I also understand criminal justice system is a $182 billion business. And the majority of the funds are funding programs getting folks after they commit crimes and coming out of the prison. Imagine if that money was shifted on the front end and we dealt with those criminal behaviors, those harms, the childhood trauma, the family issues, and having more conferencing like that. I think we can have better impact. And Roger, I would love to invite you over to our school. I've been doing this work for 25 years all across this country and the world. And we wanted to definitely have our program studied. And so we would love to invite you over. And probation, we would love to have a relationship with the adult side as we do with the juvenile as well too. So we work with
Absolutely.
adults as well too, coming out of the system as well. So I just wanted to kind of make that
Thank you.
statement there, okay? Thank you.
Hello, I'm Senator Carrie Buck. I just finished my first session. One of my bills that actually got heard was to get prisoners IDs before they left prison. As I started peeling back the layers, and I'm an educator, I'm not in your world, but as I started researching and looking for solutions to get people who are exiting prison a chance when they're just going out into the street with what they have on their backs, and then they're having to get a job. So what would you say is a challenge aside from that? And how can you help me in my next session get this bill passed so that prisoners can have IDs when they leave prison?
Can I grab this one? Is that okay?
Yep.
All right. Thank you for the work.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you so much for the great work that you do. I would encourage you to take a look at Senate Bill 423, right? In the 2011 session, working with the then Senator Tick Sigelbaum and Senator Barbara Sagafsky, we got that on. Governor Brian Sandoval signed that into law. A couple of sessions later, somebody was trying to do something, and so it unwound what Senate Bill 423 did, right? What I think that Nevada should do, and I would love to get on the plane with you and fly you to the state of Missouri because the Missouri Department of Corrections is the best that I have ever seen. And let me tell you the reason why. They have men and women in the Missouri Department of Corrections. They've developed a partnership with the Department of Motor Vehicle, go think, and men and women are getting their identifications and driver's licenses put in a manila envelope so they walk outside the gate with the identification.
Or a mobile
Yep.
something.
Yes.
So anyway, I mean, we've been trying this.
Right. So if you can,
I need help.
right. So if you can get if you can get.
The other side of
No. Just this is what I want people to think about. We have a governor, we have a director of corrections, we have a director of the Department of Motor Vehicle who sit in the governor's cabinet, and we can't get this thing figured out. My recommendation is everybody get on a plane and go see Missouri, because Missouri is the best that I have ever seen. Okay.
So can I just add? So one other, just a suggestion, but if you could get access to the data to show like what it's costing these people that wait months to be able to get a job because they can't get their ID, right? They can't meet the I-9 requirements.
We live this. I mean, we live this in the organization that Ed runs, and I know, John, you deal with this. So, yeah, it's horrible because then they end up going back to their old ways, right? 'Cause
And we know that the longer it takes for someone to reintegrate, the more likely they are to reoffend. If we don't get that up front before they even leave the prison system, developing some kiosks, then I believe that as a state we're part of the problem.
Well, July 1st, our bills, the first one that I'm submitting is that one, and I need everyone in this room's help getting prisoners' IDs so that they can get a job after they get out.
Hi there. I'm an educator here in Clark County. So my question is, in K through 12 schools, what are some skills and lessons that would be crucial to preventing individuals from being stuck in the cycle of incarceration?
I can start. I worked in juvenile detention before I switched to adult, and I thought one of the failures, and I've seen it with my own kids, is we're not teaching kids at a young age life skills. We're not teaching them how to cope. We're not teaching them how to balance a checkbook. I know those are a little outdated now. But we're not teaching them the everyday life of how to deal with something. Everybody gets a trophy now. So we really need to go back to basics. And in my opinion, and I feel like that's kind of where it needs to start. We need to start teaching them how to work through their differences with one another, learn to compromise. And we're really quick not to do that, I think, right now. But I think just going back to those basic concepts of true life skills of what it's like to be out in the world and be responsible and be held accountable for our actions and really talk to the kids. And I think teachers are our most valuable asset, especially with children, because you're seeing them every day. You're seeing when they're having a bad day, but you're also overworked with 40 kids in your classroom, so you can't take the time to truly talk to that student and work on whatever that issue might be to help them work through that. And you're probably with them more than maybe even their parent is, because they're at school, their parent's still at work, so they may be a latchkey kid or go to the aftercare program. But then by the time you come home from work, you're picking up your kid, you're trying to say, what do you need help with homework? Shower, let me help you eat, and go to bed. So teachers are probably the most valuable asset to the younger group. So I commend you and thank you for being an educator, because it's very important that we communicate and we work with kids to learn just basic life skills.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Sabri. I was a inmate of the Nevada Department of Corrections for over 25 years, and I've been out for about 8 years now. I'm gainfully employed as a paralegal at a law firm,
Nice.
And one of the things that I'm allowed to do is I work on prison cases. And one of the things that happens, guys tend to show up down there because they have a case or something like that pending. You know, when they got released, they had this case pending. And they're doing really, really bad. They have no resources whatsoever. Oftentimes, you know, I've come out of my own pocket and just give them what I had. My boss, he does the same thing, but you know, how far is that going to take him? One guy said to me, he said, man, he said, I didn't know it was going to be like this. Everything he had was on his back. He had expired his sentence, so there was no supervision for him. And I see this same guy, because I live in this area down here. I live in the area of Maine and Owens and so on and so forth, so there's a lot of homelessness down there. I see this same guy from time to time. He's just walking the streets now. I think one of the mistakes that we're making is we're not using the formerly incarcerated prisoners who are doing well as role models or as mentors, because we can't associate. You know, there's a clause, and she knows what I'm talking about. There's a clause that says we can't associate. So I'm taking a chance if I just try to help one of those guys. I can give a homeless person a few bucks, but I can't do anything for a prisoner or a former prisoner. And I think that needs to change, because let me tell you what happens. In that 25 years that I spent in prison, everybody who was my friend before I left, they weren't my friends when I came back. I had formed new friendships, and those were the guys who were in there with me for all that time. And so some of them had gotten out before I did, and I've gotten out before some of them, and we still know each other. And how do you see a person doing bad and not feel moved to help them? And you shouldn't have to sneak to do that. And that's what we have to do. I mean, literally, that's what you have to do, or you risk going back to prison. And I think that's something that really needs to be addressed. When guys hear about other guys doing well, it makes them believe they can do it too. And we have to just address that. That's all I want to say.
Thank you.
Can I just address that real quick? Sabri, thank you for sharing. I think that that's one of the benefits that we have with PMP, with parole and probation, right? If you're part of Hope for Prisoners and you are with someone who is formerly incarcerated, as long as you're not out there doing nothing stupid, then, you know, and when it's discovered that you are on paper, then it's nothing that's going to happen. It's only when someone gets engaged in something, you get pulled over, you're out doing something that you're not supposed to be doing, then that's when there is a problem. We've had Metro officers, again, that law enforcement partnership, pull people over and find that there are two people that are formerly incarcerated in the car, and because they're part of Hope for Prisoners, they let them go. They pick up the phone and give us a call and say, hey, we just wanted to let you know that, you know, so-and-so got pulled over together. But I think that the times are changing, and I think that the more and more, and I call them subject matter experts, the more and more subject matter experts that get involved in operating in this space, I think that it would work out for the better. And we do have mentors that are formerly incarcerated too.
And if I could just add on to that, you're absolutely right. And I think it's a case by case, like John says. If you're out with someone, you're not doing anything, you're not going to get in trouble. But yes, there is that condition. So those that may not know, there's a condition that's on every condition of anybody on parole and or probation that says that you will not associate with someone else who is a convicted felon or pretty much anybody that could get you in trouble, right? You may think someone is doing what they're supposed to be doing, but they may not be. And we don't want you caught up in that if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. But our agency is kind of challenged because we've had many opportunities where we've actually hosted at our building, and we have reached out to former parolees and probationers and said, you're a success to us, right? You're not that rotating door, and we would like to bring you in to mentor and talk and be a part of these Head Start programs. And we recently, last month, had one of our former I don't know if it was a parolee or probationer, but attended a school function to speak to the youth about the path that could lead them if they made mistakes. So if you're willing to share your information with me at the end, I'd be more than happy to put it in my treasure chest. So when we have those events, that we have people that are willing to be a part of it. And like John said, that's an advantage that we do have with Hope for Prisoners. We expect these new relationships in a positive light to be formed, and we're not going to violate and send someone back to prison over that when they're working on those new goals. So, but you're right, and we're doing better, and we're all doing better. It's programs like Hope for Prisoners that allow us that forum and a little bit more access to those success stories or those that want to mentor and help others.
Another question.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to steal the mic. My name is Christina Ennis, and I am a graduate of the Hope for Prisoners program. And I was sentenced to 2 to 5 and served about a year in prison and came out, immediately joined the program, went through the class, graduated, and about 2 to 3 weeks later got a job with the State of Nevada Equal Rights Commission. And even since then, it's been 5 years now since I've been part of the Nevada Equal Rights Commission, and I'm a peer-to-peer mentor, so we do have peer-to-peer mentors, and I have several mentees that are underneath me that I help guide, and if we reach out to each other once a day sometimes. We send notes to John and the team to let him know if, hey, we feel like somebody needs some help, or hey, they did a great job. Even just the other day, one of my mentees got a new job just by walking into the place, and so we celebrate those things. And I've even been able to get my notary was as an ex-felon, which is like unheard of. And so you mentioned Barbara Segovsky, but my question is, because I've all these things, and that sounds wonderful, but on paper, I'm an ex-felon, and it's really difficult to get housing. So that's a huge challenge, and I go to apply for a place, and then they look at me on paper and say, nope, can't do it, you're an ex-felon. And so what do you think you can do to change that narrative of people like me that are doing well in the community, and that we're trying so hard to make a difference in our community, but we're stuck with this challenge?
Well, I think it just goes back to educating the community that not all, just because someone made a mistake or a misjudgment or maybe a history of that doesn't mean that that's who they are today. So I would love to change all the policies and for apartment complexes and housing and even our social services, what their requirements are. I think we're slowly getting there. I think as a community, we're slowly getting there. Housing is one of our biggest challenges yet for any individual, probationers included. So, we keep asking John for a residence program, so we're kind of waiting for that still. Right. Not to throw him in the spotlight, I think we all just need to educate the community. We need to educate our community partners. We need to let them know, right, that it's okay, and that just because someone is being reintegrated back into the community or whatever that looks like for them doesn't mean that they're going to revert back to their old lifestyle. So you just have to give someone a chance, but we don't have the authority to change their policies and procedures. We can only help guide them to do better.
Right. So if I could,
yeah, please.
So there's an organization out of New York, Just Leadership USA, and they've done some work in these sort of the myths around this, and they to hear them talk, this is a misinterpretation. People will say, oh, it's federal guidelines, but that's actually not the case. And they've put together some materials that you could bring to this community and start to do some of that advocacy work, because this is something that can be changed.
Yeah. So just like the captain said, I think it's all about education, right? Educating people. When we first got up and running back in 2009 and trying to get formerly incarcerated people employment, it was like this stigma. We couldn't get folks jobs more than 825 telemarketing. But we set out on the mission to change the mindsets of employers, right? And if you think about what it was that Ms. Ennis just said, Ms. Ennis said, Senator Buckley, that she is employed by the state of Nevada. She is on the payroll of the state of Nevada. That would not have happened 10 years ago. So it's just evidence that our efforts were producing an intended effect, changing the mindsets of employers. And right now, our organization is sitting on more jobs right now than we can fill. And they're with employers who have never considered hiring formerly incarcerated people before, but setting out on that mission to change the mindset. We need to do the same thing in housing.
Yes.
Right? With that same pattern that we did and getting the employers to change their mindsets, right? We need to get the housing folks, their mindset change the same way. But what's going to do that? More and more stories like you and the 4,500 people that we have the privilege to work with, right? That not only did you not ever go back to prison, but here it is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years later, you're living levels of life that most people only dream of.
Yep.
And this is when we hold their feet to the fire and ask them, well, if not her, then who? But keep up the good work. I'm proud of you working for the state of Nevada, Senator Buck.
And it's, related to this too, there are many states now who have new laws around exoneration too. And the research shows that after 7 years of the likelihood of recidivating is the same as someone who's never committed a crime. And so so that's another thing to advocate for is let's get some exoneration laws in Nevada too, so that can be off your record forever.
Is there a question here?
Yes, question over here regarding housing. I'd like to come back on that topic. As someone who was formerly incarcerated, I spent 20 years in the Federal Bureau of Prisons on a 213-year sentence. Very, very grateful for the opportunity to come out here, to get a second chance at life, and to work for a period at Hope for Prisoners. One of the things that I saw on a daily basis was our inability to meet those individuals' housing needs. So we started a Qualified Opportunity Zone Fund, which is actually created to help revitalize the community. Housing is that essential underlying need that if we're not serving that need, whatever else we try and layer on top is not going to stick. I know this from my own experience. I was one of those 18 to 24-year-olds who was in and out of the system. And what happened is I came out of the county jail without a home, without a vehicle, and in a moment of desperation, I started along a string of criminal activity that netted me a life sentence. That wasn't my plan. None of us that leaves any form of incarceration, whether it's the county jail or the state prison, no one leaves thinking that they're going to end up back in there. We need to start working earlier to prepare individuals for release. We've spent a lot of time recently inside CCDC helping prepare those individuals, and the number one thing that comes up on each one of those individuals that we're working with is that they don't know where they're going to live. The city of North Las Vegas has been tremendous. They're helping us establish space to erect some of that housing. We hope to put up 250 affordable housing units for individuals like myself that without that opportunity, I wouldn't be able to get into the market. When I moved to Las Vegas, every application that I put in for a rent was immediately denied. As soon as my wife applied for the same exact residence, we were approved. That criminal conviction is one of those barriers. It's one of our barriers to success. But without addressing that underlying need of housing, we're in serious trouble. So my question to the panel is, what are those initiatives that we are currently engaging in? What are we doing to address that underlying need of housing?
Thank you. Anyone that can respond? Housing.
I actually don't know more than what I already said. I just know that Just Leadership USA has a movement that they're doing, and they've really tried to create some of these materials to help people advocate for this. It sounds like you already are on the path, right? If you're working to develop these units too. I mean, that's another successful strategy that I've seen done in other jurisdictions too. Create those options. So I don't. But I know there are people that you can get in touch with who could guide you and really show you how they're making a difference in other jurisdictions. In New York, it's a right. I mean, they cannot let somebody out of incarceration without having a place to live, and they find a way to do it, right? But the law forces them to do that. But that's rare. There are not very many jurisdictions. It's more common to have it the way it is now, where if you have a felony on your record, and that's a very common story, where, in a family, you have to hide the fact that somebody in your family has a felony, and they can never be named on a lease because it just can't happen.
We're just going to take one last question back there. Maybe we can take these two since.
Thank you. My name is Graham. Thank you for bringing that issue up to us. Thank you, Adam. To go back to Brother Sabri, his issue was, I'm a current graduate and mentor in the Hope for Prisoners program. I graduated the class of May 2019, and I'm currently an engineer for Station Casinos, and I'm a supervisor. So to answer your question, Sabri, is I am a mentor to a few gentlemen that have actually known me for a good span of my life. Okay, and during the course of my life, obviously, the decisions I made led me to prison. I did about 15 years. And last week, John gave me the opportunity to actually have a 2-hour block, me and my wife, at the workshop. And I went into the workshop kind of not knowing what to expect, and I ran into 4 people that I hadn't seen in a long time that came to the program for whatever reason. And when they seen me, they could not believe how I'm living my life today. They couldn't believe it. They called me by a name that I haven't heard in years. And it was like, for a second, it actually kind of got disruptive to the class because they were excited to see me, but yet couldn't believe that I was there teaching this workshop and couldn't believe the way I'm living my life, employed with a casino, 15 felony convictions. I'm a supervisor. I got my kids back because of the program. The family reunification of it and all that led up to me being a mentor. And these gentlemen that know me see me on a regular basis. And now I'm actually a mentor to one of the gentlemen that I used to literally run the streets with. And our plan is, he see me, he's like, oh, dude, you've gotten fat. And I'm like, well, you're still working out, so maybe that can be our connection 3 times a week. You help me, I help you. So to answer your question, that is something that John has implemented. And I am a mentee, a mentor to 2 gentlemen that have known me. So that is something that these gentlemen see and they respect, and hopefully that'll keep a few of those gentlemen in the program, which they express to me that, we see you here, we know you can do it, I'm here to stay. So
thank you. We'll just have this one last question here. I want to be respectful of everyone's time.
Hi, my name is Andrew. I'm 17, so I've seen a lot of people that are in and out of the system my whole life. And one thing I did notice is that whenever they're out, they're kind of embarrassed of their background and they don't want to really step out of their way to go and try to do something better for themselves. And they're so comfortable with what they were doing. So what's something in the system that you would do to help them feel more confident to step out of their comfort zone and to join these programs to help them out?
Well, I think one of the things, Chef Jeff answered one of those questions, right? To be able to come alongside them, to be able to help change their mindsets, right? You have to coach them or educate them or encourage them to see themselves differently, right? To get them to a place where they understand that we've all made mistakes, but we're not the mistakes that we made. Teach them how to build up their self-esteem, right? So they'll be able to move forward in life.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh,
Good evening, everyone. My name is Willie Cherry. I am a community worker. I'm a police chaplain, and I have worked behind the scenes. One of the guys I helped was fully pardoned on yesterday, and as I communicate with the ex-felon, they open doors for me to talk to other gang members and stuff. I used to go in and talk to them and try to help them. I tell them if they want to change the way they live, they have to change the way they think. Because with that old mindset, with that old community thing, you have to get out of there and do things different. You have to be the change that you want to see. I have done some things with Metropolitan Police. We helped bring recap to Las Vegas. I have taken Hope for Prisoners to Shreveport, Louisiana, and they denied it. They didn't want it. I talked to the sheriff of Bossier, Louisiana. When I go back, he said he'd like to talk to me about it because I explained to him what it was all about, and he sounded interested, so I'll be taking that down to him. Mr. Ponder and we're good friends. And but anyway, I have not worked personally in Hope for Prisoners, but I have worked with Hope for Prisoners, and I have worked with quite a few ex-felons. And so to help turn their lives around. And I let them know that the Bible says, for all have sinned, not y'all have sinned, but all have sinned. And I say, there's some things I have done in my life. If I got caught, I'd have been in the same situation. And so I don't want you to be down on yourself. Hold your head up, and we're going to get through this together. So, but anyway, let us not be so judgmental, because it could be your brother, your sister, your mama, your daddy. But we have to look at that in that sense, so that we have to embrace each and every one of, because we need to care for each and every one of us. Thank you so much.
thank you. Okay, so we have run out of time, so I just want to give a special thank you to each of our panelists for their insight during tonight's program. I certainly hope that you will leave here with knowledge that maybe you hadn't had before, and hoping that this can be the beginning of collaboration with some of the organizations that have been mentioned throughout tonight's program. So thank you for coming, and please give our panelists a round of applause. Great job.